Hello, guys. Welcome to our Lab 16 cycle meeting. I am happy to see you all. I wish everybody was here, but it's only half of us today. So, today is the 9th of the 9th of September. So, it is a quite, probably very loaded day. But we do know that it has to do with the Gregorian calendar. If you guys noticed, if you guys heard, I think it was Red Program 15 from Lab 15, where Ale explained a little bit about the difference between, oh, Molly's here, the difference between the Gregorian calendar and calendaria. Gregorian calendar has a fusion between the solar and the social aspects, right? It has no difference. So Ale said that the situation that emerges from that fusion is confusion because there is no separation. Hi, Molly, welcome.
Hi, hi.
Um, and that in calendaria, that is like the main thing, that there is a difference between, there's a separation between these 22 laps and the ring of fire, or the clock as Ale calls it. The part of the clock, the last 13 days, is the one that has to do with the algorithm regarding the solar aspect. And the 22 laps have to do with our social documentation, right? The first 11 laps have to do with our own personal update, and then the second 22 laps have to do with how we deal with each other's updates and how we interact with each other. But it does have this separation, and that is like the main thing between the main difference between the Gregorian and calendaria. So if we look at the 9th of the 9th, that is, we have to just note that this is the Gregorian calendar, right? And then we have day 4, 12, day 12 of lap 16. And lap 16 is a very important lap because we know that calendaria is 16 based. Every lap has 16 days. So we are now on lap 16. And in the past, Ale has developed that the concepts of the librarian and the programmer, right? The day of the programmer globally is day 256, which is the last day of lap 16. 16 times 16 is 256, day of the programmer. 256 is, it has to do with the number of bits. Like it has a technological reason why the programmers chose day 256 of the year to be the day of the programmer. And we know that the programmer has to do with the cone, right? The cone has to do with the reception of signals. It is prior to the experience. It is like another aspect that our processor deals with prior to the experience. Another thing that Ale said lately is that part specifically, that our processor can be trained and should be trained to shift its focus between the part of the state of the flow of signals and the experience, right? If we do not have an exercised processor, and if we are not um, using all parts of our octave, which is the 4 quadrants, then what's going to happen? The flow of signals is going to ingress, it's going to go into directly our memories, activate our reactives, go directly to an experience, and then the only thing that we have left to do is value, place a value on that experience. I liked it, I didn't like it, this. The scale of values, right? But if we are exercising our processor and our focus, our observer, to also integrate that aspect that is prior to the experience and spend our awareness there before it turns into an experience, then we are exercising our processor, right? We're using it, because if not, we're not actually using it. It is just like a bridge that lets all the flow of signals without any processing. So that's what the processor is for, processing the flow of signals so that we can have that capacity to organize. Remember that order list, order that flow of signals depending on what each signal, where the each signal belongs to, like in because we know that we are multidimensional. The thing is that we have had an education where the only identity we have is analogic, linear analogic material, right? So what we're doing here with LGC is creating this abstract immaterial identity, which is the main identity. It should be the main identity, so that we do not identify way too much with the third dimension and then get lost in the secondary unfoldment because we de-estimated our identity in the antimatter, because we placed all of the valued more our material identity rather than our immaterial identity, which should be the other way around, right? Because we are primordially immaterial. We come from nothingness. It is more natural to not exist than to exist. So to recover, that's what we would call, you remember in the first parts of LGC, we would call the return to the origin. Well, the return to the origin is not actually returning. I would say that it is recovering that identity in the antimatter so that we do not get lost in the secondary unfoldment, so that we do not lose our connection to the primary unfoldment, to the source itself, which is what is happening to some third dimensional consciousness says that are running away from their exploded native stars and looking for other third dimensions so that they can continue to be projected, because they have lost that. Why? Because they prioritized their material identity. Okay, so LGC, that is what it's for. And another thing, interesting thing that I said about LGC is that LGC has to do more with things that will never turn into experiences than with actual experiences, because it has to do with anticipation and the processing signals in the cone prior to them becoming experiences, if it's not necessary for them to become experiences. So it is like risk management, administrating that flow of signals so that we are able to anticipate experiences that don't necessarily have to turn into experiences. So that is the part of the programmer. What does the programmer do? It works in the cone, and the only ones that can use the programmer are probably receivers that are natively more because even if they don't have resonance with LGC, there are some receivers that have specific connections, right? That work in specific ways, even if they are not aware of that. We are aware of that, we are conscious of that. So we can use actively and consciously use our programmer to work with the flow of signals, use our processor, order the list, and then see in experience how good or bad my programming of those signals are, right? Because the signals are pure, they are not codified. It's what we call, that's why we call it flow of signals. So the programmer programs, codifies those signals so that they later become experiences. But when we are codifying those signals, we have to take into consideration the unified field, the specific entorno in which we are projected, in which we are living inside. We have to take into consideration the entorno, which is what, if there's a third dimensional consciousness that comes from outside of the solar system and installs itself here, it doesn't have the variables of this specific entorno because it's not legitimately here connected. It's not legitimately connected in here. So it doesn't take those variables into consideration. That is why the San Andreas fault happened. Okay, that is what it has to do with. It has to do with a code that does not take into consideration the entorno, feminine aspect, space. It doesn't take into consideration the space inside which it's being or trying to print itself in. It's not, so it breaks it. It breaks the entorno because it does not include the variables of the entorno to make that codification. And of course, when that codification wants to print itself, it breaks everything because it doesn't take into consideration all those things, right? So that is the problem of the, not problem, but like situation of the expressed universe, which is where sun is coming out of right now. But every star that is born has to go through that because that is where it gets formed. It gets charged with all of these contents, right? It gets organized, it gets formed. It is like when we want to build something out of iron, so we put it in the fire, right? And then we forge it with fire, and like it's a little violent, and it's a little like, you know, uh coarse. That's kind of like, if we wanted to use an analogy of how a star evolves and how it gets formed inside the universe. Now, sun wants to qualify, and what it's doing is that it is mounting its existence all the way from the subatomic instance, right? So this means that now the solar system is under the management of the owner of the solar system, when before it was managed or interfered by cosmic influences, which is why we've been dealing with all of these messes that translate into very cruel or very hectic or very chaotic experiences. And we have been very close to self-destruction because of this reason. So that's what the signal of LGC comes to help us, educate us in our abstract aspect, in our immaterial aspect, in our immaterial identity, the flow of signals, the processing of the flow of signals, so that all of these chaotic experiences that we have had in the past that were necessary for our star, now that if we qualify into the civilized express universe, that then that wouldn't be necessary anymore, because we would have an abstract identity that is processing signals before they turn into experiences, right? I don't know why I got all the way there where I began. But yeah, so the difference between Gregorian and calendaria, right? And another thing about calendaria is that when calendaria was born in 2017, which is 8 years from 2025. It was an Asume year as well. Um, the leap seconds stopped. The leap seconds stopped in 2016, and Calendaria began in 2017. But we only realized all of this in 2020. And 2020 was the beginning of event 711, 5 years ago as well. And we started to realize about the leap seconds and all of that. And that it was like a very impressive convergence that we saw. And then in 2024, in 2023, and 2024, what happens? We start to connect with the periodic table, and everything starts to synchronize perfectly with the periodic table, right? Um, this is another update that Alejandra presented in Red 142, I think, lab 15. Because we came from all the black spaces, remember? Hold on, I'm gonna share the whole document. So I'm just gonna go in the. So after the March of the Toganeson, Ale now calls it the scalar march of the Toganeson when we begin in 119, right? So it begins in lab 8 and 9. And then In lap 10, we start to go through all these black spaces of the table, right? So from lap 10, it is black, 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 and we're all in black and black and black and black and black. It's like we are just all in black. Black, 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 black until lap 14. And then what happens in lap 15? We come back. And what happened in lap 15 of 2025? Because it was in 2025, the first year that we are experiencing this specific order in the route of the periodic table. Are you guys familiar with this? This was presented in lap 15. No? Who didn't? Who didn't? Bert, Molly? No? Okay, so I'm gonna go over it again, okay? I'm gonna open the periodic table. Okay, you guys can see it? Okay, so we end the black spaces in day 224, which is the last day of lap 14. Then we begin with lap 15. And when the table was being founded, we went this way, right? When it was being established. So we went from 224 to 225 over here. And then we did this all the way until 256. That was when it was being established because we were barely going over the cloning of line 8. So we doubled it here and then we doubled it here, right? But in 2025, sorry, in lap 15, Alejandra did something different, which is the way we are going to be routing Calendaria synchronized with the periodic table from now on. So what we're going to do now is, you can see day 1 of lap 15, sorry. Day 1 of lap 15, we're going to go -2, -1, 7, and 9. That's the first quadrant of lap 15. I'll show you with the graph in a little bit. Second quadrant of lap 15, -2, -1, 7, and 9. Third quadrant of lap 15, -2, -1, 7, and 9. Last quadrant of lap 15, -2, -1, 7, and 9. Okay? And we're going to do that all the way until lap 22. And it aligns perfectly. Okay? So we're going to see it here. Now. Oh, I think I closed it. Hold on. So we were looking at the black spaces, right? Lap 14. So lap 15, we have -1, -2, -1, 7, and 9. And then second column, -2, -1, 7, and 9. You guys follow?
Okay.
Tell me if you guys are following or not.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So that is basically what we're going to do all the way until lap 22. Okay? And the last space of lap 22 will be Oganesson of line 9. Why? Because we end right here. See? Right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 15. Lap 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, lap 16. 1, 2, 3, 4, 17. 2, 3, 4, 18. 1, 2, 3, 4, 19. 1, 2, 3, 4, 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 21. 1, 2, 3, 4, 22. -2, -1, 7, and 9. I know. The first time I saw this, I was like, what? What are you saying right now, Alejandra? But it makes sense in a way. Like, even though we don't actually comprehend it or understand it yet, I don't know if it happens for you guys, but when I saw that, I was like, yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it's obvious. So I thought it was really impressive, and we shouldn't get stressed or try to understand anything. Remember, this is solar consciousness, solar mind, solar code, and we are babies. We are babies in this. We are barely trying to grasp the basic concepts of all of this. So, we shouldn't be stressed out. We should chill because this will make sense later. Later, because it usually happens that way, right? Alejandra presents something, like, I don't know if you guys remember when she presented calendaria. Everybody was like, what is this? I don't understand anything. And it's been 8 years, and now we have that experience. Now we have that as knowledge. And this is something that Ale said as well. She said, now we have been 13 years inside this development, inside this instruction, this education, this formation, right? We are on year 13. So now LGC, in the beginning, LGC couldn't be transferred to others if they didn't have like the resonance that was necessary. Now, LGC is, because it is now documented. Like, we have a history in LGC. So now, from now on, LGC is going to be able to be taught as knowledge is known in the third dimension. How is knowledge known in the third dimension? Linear, past, present, future. It has a document, it has a history. Hello, Jeff, welcome.
Hello.
And so, but before, when the signal began, of course, we didn't have that. It had no history, it had no document, it had no memory, it had nothing. So it wasn't able to be transmitted or, taught as knowledge. But from now on, it is going to be able to do that because it has a history, it has a memory. We have a whole documental base where we're going to be able to transfer it into the other people that start to resonate or that are interested in it later. So the first people that we were here and that supported all of the development from early on, um it is very likely, if we are interested, that we are going to be transmitting this into the next generations and like telling how it all went down and how it all happened, because we were like, our bodies, our consciousness were part of that transition consciously. Um so that is a very interesting thing, right? That LGC will be eventually be able to be transferred as knowledge as it is known in the third dimension. So that's where we stand with calendaria. That's where we stand with the periodic table of elements. It is very interesting. And that is the way that we should deal. Like, we should know already how to deal with these updates that LGC brings, right? Because we should be somewhat trained in our processor, somewhat trained in our upper quadrants, in our immaterial identity and such. We should be somewhat trained to deal with these updates, right? Um, so when this appears, it never ceases to amaze, of course, because it is quite impressive to observe the high level of synchronicity, as if everything was planned from the beginning. But that is how the subatomic instance functions, because it is outside of time. The subatomic instance is a spatial consciousness. It is not a temporal consciousness. So that is why, because we have been so very much installed in our temporal consciousnesses, that it is very difficult for us to start to connect with that spatial consciousness and comprehend that as a concept, comprehend as a concept that the subatomic instance is not temporal, it's spatial. So it can do whatever it wants, wherever it wants in time, because it's not a temporal, it is outside of time. So that's why when we see all these convergences, we're like, what? Because we are installed inside a temporal cycle, right? But that is like the amazing part of the potential of the human species. Because Alejandra is a human, right? And look at what she does. That is a potential of a human, of one human. So that means that the human species has this potential. It has this potential. And the possibility, the option, the alarm that went, the solar alarm that went off in 2012 was open for everybody, right? We have talked about this many times, how amazing it is that so very few people heard that alarm and are interested in that. How can you not be interested in something like this? I mean, it is like the most amazing thing ever. Um, but okay, the ones that did, okay, we were trained, we were formed, however good or bad it was, but we're here. And now it's a responsibility. It's not a privilege, it's a responsibility. And a while back, somebody in the 7-Eleven group mentioned that in an event, someone said that the people from the 7-Eleven were the chosen ones because they were privileged. And Ale was like, oh, it is quite the contrary. It is quite the contrary because we had to like deal with all the raw and put our bodies in, like it was hell. It was not a privilege. It was going through, it was hell. It was complete hell. And another thing that I would add is that not only in the 7-Eleven, just people in general that work with LGC, we are not chosen. We are the ones that chose. We are the ones that made the choice because the option was there for everybody. So we were not chosen. We chose because we had that appetite for evolution. That's why we're here. So it is, we are not privileged. We are a little bit reckless, I would say. Reckless, jumping into this adventure that is quite risky, and that it deals with many challenges in very different levels and aspects. Because it is very comfortable to not take this route. Because if you don't have an appetite for evolution, you're just here for an experience. Okay, the field mutates. I don't know how it does it, but once it mutates and once it updates, I just consume the update and I update through the unified field, and that's okay. But that's okay because everybody has their own role and their own state of evolution. And that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Some don't have that appetite for evolution. They just experience and go back to the primary unfoldment. And that is fine, right? And that is also that is an option for this entorno because it is as if we are creating the qualities or the possibilities for this entorno to receive those particles that want to have an experience. Except that in this instance, in this specific range of the solar frequency, the possibility of just inserting yourself like directly from nothingness into whatever planet, and I don't care which one it is, and I want to do whatever I want, that's not going to be a possibility. Now it's more regulated. Now it's more administrated, and the regulations are going to be much more strict for somebody to project themselves in here. That gives a lot of hope. Every time I hear that, I'm just like, okay, let's just trust the process. We have been working a lot, layer by layer, element by element, like founding, establishing, um, doing a lot of metrics and dealing with, so many signals that in 2025, what's happening? Everything is being executed all together. That's why we are observing such level of synchronicities in LGC. And it is like a spectacle, everything that's happening, because it is as if all of the things are falling apart, but they are doing so in the most elegant way possible, right? In some areas, it's not very elegant, but at least it's contained. Like in the case of Gaza, where it's very, very cruel, but it's contained. Because if it wasn't just happening there, it would be happening to all of us. So I would say that those are the consequences of all the situations that we are trying to loosen ourselves from. The solar consciousness shaking itself from, but doing it the most elegant way that it possibly can do it. Because it's not an easy task what Sol is attempting. So um it at least it's contained, because if it wasn't contained there, it would be happening everywhere. Like that would be the state of the world, the whole world, if Sol wasn't doing what it is doing, and the LGC signal. Um, so it is a very risky transition, but it's either that or the star dying, and of course all of us with it, and the human project with it, and everything with it. Um, but I am sure that if this transition goes well, which I think it is, there's like a lot of hope. Um, then we are in for the most beautiful times ever. So we're lucky to be alive, and we're lucky to be conscious and aware of this transition. How's everybody doing? Yeah. Okay. Eh, yeah, what's going on, Bert? Your mic.
It's a lot. So I try to handle it, but it's okay.
Okay. So I just went on and on today. But what I had prepared, you know how I have my notes. So I was thinking about working with those. Same format as we usually do. Just random concepts that we're gonna touch a little bit and then discuss a little bit and then move on to the next, okay? We're not gonna go too deep into one specific concept. We're just gonna retouch several, okay? Hmm. Okay, so here's one. Every content in its massive format is a mind field. Every content in its massive format is a mind field. Why? Because they identify with what they feel. And then they want to depressurize what they feel, translating what they think, and then what they think turns into an opinion. And the result of that, what is it? Contaminated consciousness. So where does it begin? When we identify with what we feel. Because we cannot understand the difference between feeling and registrating. When we are feeling, feelings are something that are associated with the collective, with the unified field. It's a collective thing, emotions. But when we're able to, because emotions are, if we take an emotion out of its unified of the unified field, it makes no sense. That's why we have so much trouble with our architect, because our architect, I mean, it can see the unified field, but it's not in there. So like if we are only communicating with our architect through feelings, our architect's gonna be like, "What are you talking about? Like you need to neutralize that because I can't understand what you're trying to communicate with me. We cannot communicate with our architect if we are identifying with our feelings. Registrating, on the other hand, that is particular. It is a registration of the stimulation that I'm receiving through the flow of signals in a very neutral way. I am not putting a tag on it. I am not saying, oh, I am anxious. Oh, I am sad. Oh, I am mad. No, I am observing the stimulation in my body, the chemical reaction. I am observing it from the most neutral way possible, and I am not marking it with any kind of emotion. So, one thing, I was talking to my friend, she knows absolutely nothing about LGC, but she gets a lot of like anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and such. So I was like, what if instead of calling it an anxiety attack or a panic attack, we just call it pakara pakara? I got the pakara pakara. Like it's nonsense. It means nothing. Pakara pakara means nothing. But we label it as something that means nothing so that we don't want to because we don't want to label it with anxiety. So what we say is like, oh, I got the pakara pakara. I got the thing. I got the thing. I got the thing. So that opens up a space for observation and registration and be like, okay, what is this thing that I'm feeling? And just observing it, right? Instead of just immediately labeling it as something that's emotionally charged. Okay? So you guys can find creative solutions, creative inventions to deal with it, with all of that. But the main idea is find the difference between emotion and registration. That is like the main concept. Okay? Emotion is a minefield because what the only result that you're going to get from identifying fully with your emotions is a contaminated consciousness. So, what, on the other hand, what does a solar consciousness do? We want to think that we are solar consciousness, right? If we are in this process and if we're dealing with this instruction, we would like to think that we are solar consciousnesses. So what does a solar consciousness do? It counter arrests what it feels because it is able to interpret that as part of the framework contract. It is able to interpret what it feels, what it registers as part of the framework contract. So it can annul the reactive. I don't know if you guys have noticed this because all the improvements in my case, and I think this is something, of course, Ale has explained, the improvements or the expansions in my personal scope are created indirectly. I do not work directly in expanding my scopes or improvements. These things happen indirectly through the creation of concepts. If I am working in the creation of concepts constantly, I am training my architect. I am using or attempting to use all of my interdimensional infrastructure. Then what I get as a result in my experience, in my anatomic experience, I can sense those improvements because they are slowly being integrated in my design because I am including all these new references, all these new concepts. So they are indirectly improving my scope, indirectly. So where I'm going with this is that in my experience, I used to be so reactive, so reactive in the beginning. And now sometimes like my reactives don't even function. Like I mean they do, but I'm just like I sit there. I sit there and I observe the reactive, but it doesn't burst out like a volcano like it used to. I can sit there and observe my reactive and just look at it and be like, okay, that's my reactive. Yeah, okay, I can recognize it. Okay, so what does a solar consciousness do? It annuls the reactive, processes the signal in another dimension because it analyzes the signal from a format where it has no type of charge. The only place that we have charge is inside the unified field. If we process those signals outside of the box, then it can't have any charge. So when it reaches the personal scale, it does so when the signal, right? If it's processed in the cone previously to the experience, when it reaches the personal scale, it reaches the personal scale in a very elegant way, not in a reactive way. And again, she says, this is something that we have to understand prior to the experience. So when she said that about LGC, she was like, LGC has to do more with things that will never be experiences, more than it has to do with experiences. I was like, okay, well, that makes total sense because we process all these signals, right, from the express universe. Remember, Sol is a space of reception of signals of the express universe, right? Processes them, codifies them into the mind, and then turns them into an experience. If we fractalize this, we as antennas, we also do that in our relative position, of course, inside the relative hierarchy and such, okay? But we also have that capacity, flow of signals, processing them outside of the experience, and then once it's processed and properly codified with the proper variables of the entorno, then it should be condensing very elegantly into the experience. I mean, imagine that. Imagine that. Not having to express everything that I can think of, because that is express universe. If I can think of it, I have to make it real. I have to experience it. No, it doesn't have to be that way. Because in the origin of the flow of signals is usually very pure. The thing is that all the middle layers are so contaminated because we don't have this formation, space-temporal formation. So when those pure signals try to get through those dirty filters, and then the person has no processor, no consciousness, no nothing, and just takes that, distorts it, and then expresses it into something really stupid or something really perverse or something that makes no sense, that is express universe. There is no formation, space-temporal formation. Because what are we attempting to do? We're attempting to clean our filters or our middle layers so that the flow of signals, we capture, work with the flow of signals in the abstract, and then slowly uh, condense it into experience, but only the parts that are necessary, like only the good parts, only the parts that are properly codified and that work with the unified field, where everything should be synchronized, where we should include, not we, that's something that the box does. We don't do that. But the synchronization that the unified field creates, we can be a part of that, right? Because we are taking into consideration the fact that I am no longer a subatomic particle, and that I am not in the primary unfoldment where I can do whatever I want whenever I want, and then everything is instant and I get everything instantly, and then if I don't want it, I don't want it anymore. No, like we have to have a properly constructed concept of primary unfoldment and secondary unfoldment, because secondary unfoldment is restrictions, restrictions, restrictions. Primary unfoldment is no restrictions at all. If you don't like restrictions, go back to primary unfoldment. You won't have physical expression, because physical expression is the same thing as restrictions. So if we don't like restrictions, we can't be here anymore, right? But the more restrictions we have, the better we function, right? And we can see this very well. That's why I think Europeans love Latin America and Latin America loves Europe, vice versa. I think Latin Americans love Europe because it has great regulations. Oh my God. Or the United States or Canada. The regulations work and oh, when I go there, I'm just like, "Oh, this feels so nice." It feels like a relief. But I have noticed that the other way around it happens the other way around as well. I have met several Europeans that come to Latin America and they also feel free, right? They also feel liberated from all of those restrictions. So that is like a fractalized analogy of primary and secondary. Primary, complete freedom. You can do whatever you want. Secondary, full of regulations. Except that analogy with the countries, of course, is a linear analogy because when we're talking about primary and secondary enrollment, that is not linear. Okay, that's non-linear. Okay. So, yeah, annulling the reactive and processing the signal in another dimension. What does a solar consciousness do? It counter arrests what it feels, annuls the reactive, and processes the signal in another dimension from a format where it has no charge because it's not linked to the unified field. So that is the opposite of feeling, okay? So here we're talking about intuition and instinct. So captation, when we're talking about captation and resonance, that has to do with something that arrives when I'm not even able to interpret it correctly. Captation and resonance. Why? Because it's completely new, it's unprecedented. So we should be, right now to this point, very comfortable with the unknown. Because that is the only way that we are going to be able to get through this whole thing. Because that necessity of associating with the past, even inside the LGC, because we have to be careful with that, even inside the historics of LGC, because every day LGC gets updated and the updates are massive. They are leaps. So it like of course we have the base of the first years of LGC, but beware of the associations. We should always keep a clean slate when it comes to LGC because it's non-linear. Okay? Um so again, captation and resonance have to do with something that arrives that I am not able to, I'm not even able to interpret correctly because it's unprecedented. Being comfortable with what's unprecedented and observing if I want to immediately associate it with something or immediately interpret it or immediately understand it. No, it's fine. I can be in black. Remember the spaces in black in the table? It's fine. It's all contemplated. I am contained inside the container. It's okay. I'm not gonna die if there's something I don't know. I shouldn't be aware of that, afraid of that. So, this is how intuition uh um is it like intuition works better than instinct in this case. Intuition, right? Because instinct comes from the memories, comes from the feeling. So that's where we talk a little bit about -1 and -2. The two lines outside, right? That have to do with the immaterial aspect of the table, -1 and -2. Because if I don't have that connection of -1 and -2, I'm not going to have a very good time. Because the only thing that I'm going to be able to do is feed myself from the memories of the container. So I am going to be in a temporal function where the past uses the present to project itself in the future. And that's it. I'm not going to have any other choice. So -1 and -2 are my connection with the antimatter, with my immaterial aspect, the immaterial aspect of the code. That is like the source of everything. If I don't have that, I'm only going to be able to feed myself from the memories of the container. be in a temporal function, and that's it. That's why people commit suicide. That's why people kill other people. That's why people burst themselves into flames, throw bombs. Why? Because they don't have that connection, right? If they're only feeding themselves from the memory of the container and then that runs out, they, of course, they're going to self-burst. Solar consciousness does the opposite thing. It reads solar code, interprets the parameter, and codifies it to be able to obey the parameter and implement the solar code. When we're talking about parameter, remember the difference between parameter and code? When we're talking about parameter, we're talking about solar system. It's another hierarchy, okay? When we're talking about code, we're talking about Earth, the code of the Earth that is representing the parameter. For example, 54, orbitals 5 and 4, solar system, parameter, 54 code, Argentina, is trying to make a proper representation of the parameter. Well, in this case, it's very corrupt because of what we've been going through. But that's okay. We're trying to clean that. It's the solar consciousness is trying to clean that out. Okay, so again, solar consciousness does the opposite thing. It reads the solar code, interprets the parameter, and then codifies it to be able to obey the parameter and implement the solar code. Then, humanly, modulates that information, and there is where we have these three scales contemplated, which is the solar consciousness, Earth, and the human. Okay? Three scales contemplated. So that's solar consciousness. But if we only have a personal consciousness, there is no solar consciousness. The only way we can get nourished is from a closed circuit. It's always closed. The thing with the closed circuit is that it has an end and it has a beginning. So that is like what they call the end of times. Yeah, it's the end of a cycle. The thing is that if we don't have the capacity to link, to make a connection outside of the cycle to the thing that creates the cycles, then that's the end for us. But if we work on that capacity to link ourselves with the origin, with the dimension that creates the third dimension, that creates the circuits, then we can update our circuits and not have to end it. Right? Because we are connected to the source of that, like the dimension that created this dimension that we are experiencing. We're not just identifying with this specific dimension. No, we are creating an identity with the dimension that created this one. So that gives us administrative capacities. Okay. Okay, so here we're gonna talk about, wait, I need to find that word in English. No. How would you say it, guys? When you are very, is it visceral? Like when you speak from your gut? Yeah, visceral? Okay. Viscerality. She's talking about Millet, some sort, right? The viscerality of Millet. Well, Millet is not doing very well right now. It's not a very good moment for him right now. I hope he gets better. Okay, but viscerality. Viscerality is the contact point of the person that still inhabits the primary unfoldment without having any kind of knowledge of the secondary. Like if you ever meet a person that is like really visceral, like completely speaks always from there and is always like angry and it's always like that is a person that inhabits fully still the primary unfoldment and has no knowledge whatsoever about the membrane of the secondary unfoldment. So that translates into here, like I don't know, a particle that inserts itself directly into a third dimension without having any kind of knowledge of what's in between. So I am a particle in my own world. I am perfect, and I am here to conquer everybody else because they live in sort of like like in their own imagination. They do not live in the actual reality of how they should be living in here. So it is like Elon Musk, let's go conquer the universe, right? Because they have no limits, because they inhabit the primary unfoldment. They have no notion of the fact that we have limits, like our bodies have limits, right? So he wants to conquer Mars, and Putin wants to conquer everybody else. Like, they just want to conquer everything. Everybody wants to conquer, but nobody wants to have self-domain in their membrane of materialization. So, who talks about self-domain? We have heard so much about conquer, 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 but we don't usually hear, or maybe a little bit, but not too much about self-domain. Self-domain. And of course, only in LGC we can be formed in this very specific concept of primary and secondary unfoldment, right? But once we do that, life just becomes wonderful because it is as if we know our place. No? The human has always had this question of like, what's my place in the universe? Like, why am I here? Like, da, 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 da. Beginning with that, beginning with the notion of the concept of primary and secondary unfoldment, I think that orders so many things on the deck. Like that is like the beginning step of understanding my position in this experience, in this material experience. Be like, okay, I used to be, or I am, always will be this particle, and I now have a human profile. And in my origin, I am infinite. I can do whatever I want. I am the source. I am part of the source. But here in the secondary unfoldment, no. Here I have limitations. Here I have an anatomic body that only functions through regulations and restrictions. Here I have to deal with other particles that have materialized. I have to deal with the restrictions of the entorno. I have to abide by the rules of this specific context, which is this star, which is Sol, the regulations. But I mean, if you think about it, what are those regulations? Like the possibilities are still so many. It is like the sun is like, here, you have all these possibilities. You can use them. And then some humans are like, no, I, I want to go conquer Mars. And then, hello, hello.
You're frozen now. I don't know if you hear us.
Yeah, you're frozen. She's
Yeah.
gone to conquer Mars.
Yeah.
That's it. There she is in Mars.
She's gone.
She's gone. She's
Yeah.
she's conquering it.
Oh,
We're not frozen.
cosmic.
Yeah, we're not frozen. It's her contact. She's gone. She'll come back.
Oh,
Here she
she's back.
is.
Hi.
I don't know what happened. Okay, so I was saying that Sol is like, here, you have all these possibilities. You can choose and construct your material identity from all of these possibilities. And then Elon Musk's like, no, I want to go conquer Mars. I don't like any of those possibilities. No, because I don't like restrictions. That doesn't make any sense, right? I mean, we still have so many possibilities. No, we want the ones that are not available. So self-domain. difference, being able to construct proper concepts, clear as day concepts that have to do with primary unfoldment, secondary unfoldment, the membrane between that, because we needed to have a membrane, because if not, we get lost in the secondary unfoldment, we lose our primary connection, and then we don't want to turn into whatever third dimensional consciousness that is navigating, uh, through the universe trying to find planets to invade or colonize. We don't want that. So self-domain, okay? Instead of colonization. So we are all trying to process everything from our immaterial consciousness to be able to create the code in antimatter. Okay, that is why that part about our scopes, our reaches, and improvements happening indirectly. And when she vocalized this, it made so much sense to me, because I never, like, naturally, personally, I never, like, attempted to improve my scope directly. Like, I never what had it in me, like, oh, I have this bad behavior, I need to fix my behavior. I never had the focus on improving my behavior. It was never there. It was always in a more abstract part of myself where I worked on my behavior and my defects. Because when Alejandra talks about defects, she's talking about defects in the processor, not in the behavior. Because if we try to improve our behavior, the only thing we're going to do is we're going to repress. But if we work at the level of the processor, what defects do I have in my processor of signals prior to the experience? That is the key. Working in the defects of my processor. Because if I don't do that, if I am focusing on the experience and the behavior, I'm not going to be able ever to improve, because I am going to be trying to improve myself directly. And that's not how improvements work. We have to work on the improvement, but of the code, which is outside of existence, right? So processing everything through our immaterial consciousness to be able to create the code in the antimatter, and so that we are all prepared with the compromise, the universal compromise that soul has, to remove all of those selfish consciousnesses that have fled the death of their native stars, so that we are all prepared for the universal compromise that soul has, to remove all those third dimensional consciousnesses that have fled the death of their native stars. What? This is insane. And this is what we've all been wishing for all along, haven't we? Like, just get the hell away from here. We've been hearing this stupid comment in social media where people are saying nature is overrated. People give too much value to nature. I'm like, get the hell out of here. Like, what are you even doing in this planet? Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out. You don't belong here. Like, if you're thinking that, get out. Get out. Get out. That's what I think about all the time. Get out. Leave. Okay. So, Ale has been talking about this object. Well, not just Ale, of course, it's in the news. I don't know if you guys have heard it. It's called Atlas something, yeah? That it's going to be behind the sun on the 29th of October. This is an example of a third dimensional consciousness that has fled the death of their native star. They have exploded their native star because they prioritized their material identity far more. They don't even value their immaterial identity. They're completely disconnected from antimatter. So they have no source for novelties. They are practically starving. Like, their soul is starved. That's why they desperately search for young consciousnesses that still have that connection and that they can be vulnerated, right? But like in from our perspective, we see that as something evil or perverse. But from the perspective of the express universe and the stars, that's just how it goes. You know, we interpret it that way because of our relative position. And because we are experiencing that as an experience. We're not the ones creating the experiment. That's why, you know, experience it can be quite cruel. But from the perspective of a star, that's just how it goes because without those interferences, the solar code cannot progress. Remember that? So it's part of the space-temporal adventure. So what Sol is doing and the Andromedan signal is doing, preparing us for the universal compromise of Sol. Because this is a commitment of Sol with the universe. So I think that hearing all of this, we can understand why many human consciousnesses are not interested. Because it is quite a ride. I mean, imagine. It is a big deal. It is a big responsibility. Um, okay, so here we're gonna talk about self-rejection. If we self-reject, but we cannot interpret it as rejection, then we turn that into a rejection of the world. But it's actually self-rejection, which is what Putin does, for example. Right? Completely disconnected, completely self-rejects. But since he, like, his ego doesn't allow him to understand how much he rejects himself, then he rejects others and murders everybody. But that is just a projection of his own self-rejection. Why? Because the rest of the world demands from me a progress that I do not wish to have. So that's what rejection is. Like, if we understand rejection from that place, it is so, I think, unburdening. Because in my case, and probably all of you guys, if we're here together, have experienced rejection quite a bit. Because usually, if we have this variable, we are probably like people that are just our presence triggers things in other people that they don't want to progress, like not interested. No, 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 no. Just get away from me. Rejection. Right? But if we interpret rejection from an emotional, it's going to hurt us quite a lot. But if we interpret rejection from this place, first of all, it's self-rejection. And second of all, you are demanding of me a progress that I don't want to have. Get away. Okay, that's okay. It's not even my place to make you progress, so that's okay. You know? So I think that is very cool to just separate and so that we don't hurt our human profile. So that our human profiles are very much contained and very much taken care of because we're quite fragile. We are quite sensitive. That's why we need to create all of those neutralized profiles in antimatter so that our human, which is the baby, the human profile is the baby. It is the sensitive, it is the soft part of ourselves, the last link. But we have to be containing ourselves from the antimatter so that we don't get hurt. Our bodies don't get hurt. Our chemistry doesn't get hurt. Our nervous system doesn't get overstimulated. We don't get stressed. We don't age. Isn't that what we want? We don't want to age. Yeah, well, the only way to do that is to work in the antimatter. We can do that, you guys. We can do that. Like, if we work very well on our concepts, that is a possible thing. Okay. So, when you are materially expressed, it is completely illegal to not progress. But here we go again with the part of the ones that are still inhabiting their primary unfoldment. They think that progress is not a requirement. In the primary unfoldment, evolution is not a requirement. In the secondary unfoldment, it is a requirement. Progress is a requirement because that is the reason why totality provides you with its credit. Because what totality wants is to improve itself. And every particle that injects itself in the secondary unfoldment is having a particular interpretation of totality. Remember ALL in the musical notes diagram? ALL, that is my specific interpretation of LLA. That is the reason why totality gives me credit, because it wants to improve itself. It wants to expand itself. So if I'm not expanding totality, if I'm not progressing, then I shouldn't be here in the secondary unfoldment, because that is like the cause for it to be. So if the identity is material, progress is mandatory. So that Russian that assumes a transition becomes a Ukrainian. See the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Russia wants to absorb Ukraine because it doesn't want to progress because it's interfered, right? Because progression means that it's not going to be able to be controlled by those cosmic influences anymore. So it wants to absorb the public the perception of the solar octave 380 that demands that it progresses. But if there's a Russian that assumes that transition, it assumes to progress, okay? Because the Ukrainian has to do with creating the promise of materialization and the program that 30 carries inside, right? 380. The program that 30 carries. 3, third orbital, and sun. The program of the solar program in the third orbital. But now we're talking about solar program. We're not talking about cosmic management. Okay? So that's like part of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. The demand of progress because of the materialization and the resistance. The resistance. Because they don't want to lose control. Okay? Okay. Here she starts to talk about love. So interesting. It's so interesting. Here she says, if I don't have a clear concept of my immaterial identity, I will be completely incapable of providing love, and I am going to need it desperately. I'm going to need someone else to use their processor to provide me with love. So if we see this like in our patterns, in our social patterns, in our relationship patterns, there's always somebody that provides the love and someone that takes the love. And the one that provides the love is usually very hurt. But the one that provides the love is usually the person that has a more immaterial identity. And the person that receives the love is a person that has a more material identity. Like doesn't have that much of a connection with the processor. But now, those are like the old configurations that were provided by the unified field, because that was available. That was what was available. It was a situation that the solar code had. But now we have other configurations possible. We can all make that transition, because if we all start to work with a processor and we start to work on our immaterial identity, all of us, then we're all going to be able to provide with the love. And so I'm not going to be in need of the love or in need of giving the love. I'm going to give it to myself. The other person's going to give it to themselves. And then we're going to be able to share it, right? Like the configuration changes completely. But these are all possibilities that we have to develop because remember, from now on, things are not just going to be given to us. We have to build them, we have to construct them, especially more so in our case, because we are not going to be updating with the current of the unified field. No, we're doing it particularly because our particular progress is providing variables to the unified field. That is like we are if we are progressing particularly, we are making the unified field progress. We are adding variables and potentials to the whole species. This is a global profile. This is a global role that we have. But it's a silent one, right? No one's gonna give us an award for this. We're always gonna be anonymous. But it's happening. Okay. Okay, something else she said that is quite radical. She says, when you give love, you spread seed in others, and that seed is going to germinate in their lives where you're not going to participate. That is love. Oh, wow. She's like, that is love. The rest, bullshit. Spreading seed in the lives of others and those seeds germinating where you're not going to participate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. I think we can see the purest form of love in the mothers. You know, they just give, 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 and then their kids flourish and fly, and they're happy. Okay, so when we're interacting, a person that knows how to give love has no conflict with the processor while interacting with the people that they have around them that don't work with the processor. Okay, so a person that knows how to give love usually doesn't have conflict in their processor when they interact with people that don't know how to give love. But usually we can see this in, and I am sure all of us have experienced a toxic relationship like this. There's a person that provides the love, someone that takes it. But the thing is that if there's someone that works with the processor and someone that doesn't work with the processor, instead of the relationship being enriched, the relationship begins to poison itself because one is in the master and the other one is in the lover. So it's like, because in Spanish it's amo, amo is master, but it's also to love, amo. And then the love, the amo y amor. The amo is the master. So in those old configurations, we could see that when someone is the master and someone is the one that takes from or is submitted to. So that becomes poisoned. Why? Because the one that is in the place of the master has a residue that it cannot process. So it becomes poisoned. So the person that provides the love ends up separating from the person that cannot process it because it turns into poison. So separation is inevitable because there's something that cannot be processed. So there needs to be a separation to not burst it from poison. So that one is like to think about for a while. I have read this part quite a bit of times and I'm still like, okay, wait. Um, that's like a lot, right? It's a lot. It's a lot. Okay, next concept. Linear time does not exist. It is something that was mounted. It's an occurrence from another dimension. Linear time is an occurrence from another dimension. But now imagine if you only took a linear identity and you forgot that this linear identity was established or founded from another dimension, you're gonna be it's not gonna work, because you need to be establishing yourself continuously. If you're not doing that, remember that concept, fundir, fundar. Fundir is to dissolve. Fundar is to establish. But you can see in Spanish, fundir, dissolve. Fundar, establish. If we don't re-establish ourselves continuously, we dissolve. Right? Because we cannot forget that this linear experience is mounted by a prior dimension. And we cannot lose that connection, because we have to continuously be re-establishing ourselves, because we have that connection with the source. Right? It requires maintenance. So digital and analogic have to have a project in common. Digital and analogic have to have a project in common. And what is that common project? To create a new space-time. Constantly create a new space-time, a new combination of space-time. Because what is time? Quality. It's a quality of space, and it continuously provides novelties, right? But we shouldn't be identifying fully with the temporal aspect, right? This possibility in this transition to have a spatial identity, so that we are able to continuously reestablish ourselves inside space-time and also be a part of the creation of new cycles. Okay? We're gonna take a 10-minute break, you guys, and I'll see you, okay? Remind me to start recording again when I come back. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay, we are back. So, here she starts to talk about magnetism and the magnetic aspect and the electric aspect. From the magnetic perspective, we will be talking about subordination in an interaction. If there's magnetism, there's going to be subordination. While if it's from the electric perspective, there will be a complementation. Okay? The thing is that it
Sorry,
is not that
Denise.
what,
Sorry, Denise.
yeah?
What word are you saying? If there's magnetic, there is
Subordination.
subordination. Oh, okay, thank you. I didn't catch it.
Yeah. But it is not that we're saying that, oh, the electric aspect is bad or good, or no. Of course, we both have both. We all have both. The thing is that the processor can have a switch between both. If the octave is inhabited, the consciousness participates. So it's not a conflict. Of course, if the consciousness is participating in anything, there will be no conflict. Like if we observe any kind of conflict in society, it's because the consciousness is not participating. Basic. It is like completely sleep, and they are just functioning based on a programmed situation. There is no consciousness whatsoever because they have no access outside of the cycle. If the octave is cloned from the memories of the container, the only thing that that person expects is a continuation of the same task in the same conditions. So the electric aspect of the octave does not function, only the magnetic. When the consciousness is not participating, the only part of the octave that is functioning is the magnetic aspect. In the clone octaves are so many. Because even if there are evident changes in the environment, those cloned octaves get overwhelmed because they are configured to ignore anything that is new, and they are configured to force convergences, applying any deformation that is necessary. So, resisting to change and forcing convergences, applying any deformation that is necessary, that has to do with the cloned octave. That has no, the electric aspect is not very prominent. It's much more magnetic. Okay, so order depends on chaos. Who here has a problem with chaos? We want to be perfect. We want perfectionism. I used to have a problem with that. I used to want to be very much perfect and everything to be perfect and everything to be ordered and organized all the time. But then slowly, indirectly, I started to loosen up because chaos is necessary. Chaos is like the base of everything because order cannot exist if chaos doesn't exist previously, of course. Um, that's why we feel so good when we order our house. It's messy, and then we spend the whole day cleaning up, and then we feel so good, right? Chaos does not depend on order, but order depends on chaos. Nonlinearity does not depend on linearity, but linearity does depend on nonlinearity. The brain captures what's nonlinear and it tries to provide linearity. It traduces dimensions. That's what the brain does. It is a translator of dimensions. It receives something that is not linear and it tries to deliver something that is linear. So the mute area captures, the processor translates, the psychological structure saves, and the unfolded communicates. The mute area captures, the processor translates, the psychological structure saves, and the unfolded communicates. The thing is that the architect might be finding a mind field in the mute area of its unfolded. Because if the unfolded is stereotypically oriented, the architect can't do anything about it. That's what we were saying earlier, remember? If the unfolded is completely identified with its emotions, it's completely identified with this material aspect, with stereotypes, with everything that has to do with the unified field, the architect does not understand it and that language because it's not inside the unified field, the architect. So that's why it is so important to use other parts of our octave to have a better communication with our architect. Because if not, it can't do much. And we're going to feel stuck. That's because we are identified more with our third dimensional identity. And we process everything through the unified field, through the stereotypes. The people from society that have a social frame, social references, search for resources outside and not inside, right? If their frames are completely social, then whatever resources they need, they're going to be looking for them outside instead of inside, right? So the architect cannot identify those contents that are that are having an impact in the mute area, because that's the fourth cardinality that had an impact on the octave, and the architect coming from outside doesn't understand anything. So if there is something from the fourth cardinality that had an impact on the octave, the architect is like, I don't understand. Like, help. Help. If it has to do with the unified field, you need to help your architect comprehend. So you need to turn it into a much more technical and objective and a language that has to do with the frames and not just with the unified field so that your architect understands what's happening. That's like a challenge. That's a challenge because we're so used to interpret everything with the fourth cardinality included. And learning to remove and add the fourth cardinality however we need it, that is like very difficult to do. Like it's complicated because we need a lot of concepts to be able to do that. So it takes the architect a long time to be able to coexist with this situation because while the unfolded remains unconscious in that mute area. If the unfolded remains unconscious in that mute area, then the architect is having a really hard time. Yeah. So because the architect has to work in the antimatter with all of those contents. But because all of those things are not like he can't understand any of those things because they only make sense inside the container. So it is like the architect doing this all the time. Hold on. Hello, a ver, vamos. Aquí, para aquí. Vamos. Sorry, my dogs. So, like in conclusion, the architect cannot understand things that only make sense inside the container because it's outside. Okay? Okay, this is really interesting. Here she talks about the mental space, the mind, the consciousness, and the body. She says, the mental space will be playing for the consciousness. It will either be playing for the consciousness, the mind, or it will be the oh wait, what's that word? Brain. Kidnapped. Okay, again. The mental space will be playing for the consciousness, or it will be kidnapped by the body, by what happens to the body. So I have been actively reasoning this for a while now, and it has been quite complicated to achieve not contaminate my mind with what is happening to my body. I don't know if you guys can identify now this. Something is happening to your body. What is it that happens immediately? Bah, it goes to the mind. And then the mind goes like that. So I have been actively working on this, being like, okay, this is happening to my body and my mind should be working for my consciousness and not be kidnapped by my body. That is like a big ability, big, huge ability that I have found because that is using your processor to be like, okay, this is my mind, but I am using my consciousness all the time. The consciousness is being used all the time. That neutral observer used all the time. This is my mind, okay, and it's working for my consciousness. And this is my body, and things are happening to my body. Impacts that have to do with the fourth cardinality, and that's that. The body is the body. It has its chemistry. It has its processes. It has its own logic. But I shouldn't transfer whatever's happening to my body into my mind because I'm going to be contaminating it.
Can we I just want to, if you don't mind, just want to kind of compare experiences. This is something I discovered last couple of weeks. Where, you know, just historically, right, in trauma, particularly in youth, you disassociate, right? So not being in the body. And then part of the process, more mainstream, is to get in the body again to feel it. But what I find now with the body, I don't even know if symptoms are the right word, because it's not an illness, it's not an ailment, but the body experience. And I've like kind of rediscovered in the last couple of weeks of trying to exercise, like pulling back out of the body,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel quite the same as dissociation.
Stepping back.
No, because you're not dissociating.
Yeah. Like I
No,
have to
because
pull my
you are
consciousness above.
yeah, because you are just shifting your focus to another part of your octave. But
Mhm.
dissociating is disconnecting completely
Right.
from the octave itself. What you're doing is that you are just shifting your focus to a specific part of your configuration that where you need,
Yeah.
because it's like we use that abstract part of ourselves to observe what is going on to the body.
Yeah. And also when with the solar updates, that affects the soma, the body, and it's affecting the cells and it's affecting the DNA. So all of that is going to manifest and express in the body. And we don't know if that is illness or a symptom. It's just happening to the body and it fits in with lots of things that are going on.
Yeah.
I just
Mhm,
find
mhm.
some of those, again, habitually I want to go to the word symptom, but it doesn't feel
It's
right.
not right. No.
But the idea is that sometimes it's too much. It's like too intense. It's just too much.
It's a state.
It's a state. And I just, yeah, like I said, maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, just kind of shifted my awareness just outside above. And it makes it a bit easier to manage.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's a sign that your octave is functioning.
Mhm.
See, that is what we're talking about earlier about the improvements coming, like we're working on our improvements indirectly, and then we are noticing those improvements once they are executed. But because we are working in the antimatter, we're working in the codification. So
Mhm.
then you're like, oh, this is an improvement, right? But you were not like actively working on that specific thing.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, I didn't have the language for it, just kind of
No.
discovered it. And now you're
Yeah.
saying it here. I was like, it's a little bit mind-boggling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so cool, huh? Just
Yes.
to start sensing all these novelties. Because for me, this whole year has been like that. Like my complete software was completely updated. I'm just like discovering new things,
Mm.
like new things inside me that I was like, oh, was that there? Is that new? Like who I didn't know that it was there.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
where it's like, my only reference was dissociation, but it doesn't feel the same.
Yeah. It doesn't fit anymore.
I just didn't have the language for it. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Wow. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I second that because I'm having that same experience. It's like stepping to one side and you're really observing it. And it's not you're not blending in any way with it. You're stepping back and you can
Yeah.
sort of see what's happening and you don't want to label it. At least you try not to label it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It does feel like
Yeah.
something that needs practice.
Oh, it
Yeah.
definitely does.
Definitely exercise.
Definitely does.
Yeah, we'll have to do the workout course.
Yeah, the gym, the LGC gym, we have to create
There we go.
those. That's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, the thing is that we can't have both things. We can't have the mind working for the consciousness at the same time that we have the mind kidnapped by the body. Like those two things cannot happen simultaneously. There has to be only one. So there's either domain or there isn't. If there is a domain of the consciousness, then the mind controls the body. and not the body controlling the mind. And I think this is so clear and experience. I think we can see very, very clearly when we have domain, which has to do with the mind working with the consciousness, or when our bodies take a hold of our minds and our bodies control our minds. So yeah, I don't like that. I really don't like that. But it still happens. We're working on it. So from the mind to the body, we have control. From the consciousness to the mind, we have domain. From the mind to the body, we have control. From the consciousness to the mind, we have domain. So if the consciousness is active, and we're talking about space-temporal consciousness, not physical consciousness, right? Remember, the consciousness with an S has to do with the physical consciousness. No, space-temporal consciousness, if that one is active, which is a consciousness that has to do with the observer, not with the brain, then we can do this, right? We can work with this. But it has to be space-temporal consciousness. Here she talks about dissociation. There are people that are completely dissociated from their observer because they don't need it. Because they are tied to a memory unit that is collective, where they have a biological program that is active, that it's automatic, and it does everything automatically. So it doesn't need to use the observer. Like it's not interested in using it because the observer is particular. The observer is particular and it can remain unactive. So if that particular observer is unactive, the only consciousness that we have activated is the physical consciousness. So that's where we can only feel, we can only think. And to that we call consciousness. When we are not using the upper two quadrants, when they are blocked. So we're only identifying with what we feel. And then we feel, we think, and we think that is consciousness. I mean, it is consciousness, but it is a consciousness of the physical scale. And in that situation, we are inside a program. The observer is not inside a program. It is not inside a cycle. The space-temporal consciousness is not part of the body. It doesn't need it. It's not part of the brain. The consciousness that is codified turns into the mind. But there we are talking about the creation of the mind, not the functioning of the mind. The consciousness, when it's being codified, it creates mind. And that's where we're talking about the creation of the mind, right? What provides the life to the mind is the consciousness, and that is outside the brain. Outside of life, outside of the cycle, that is where we can have complete domain. But that is a domain that has to do with the architect. If the body is under a configuration where it's running with an automatic program that comes from under, because the fourth cardinality inserts you inside that functioning, then you will not be able to dominate anything. If the body is under a configuration of an automatic program, there can be no domain. You will feel so many things, and to get rid of all of the things that you feel, you're going to be expressing that in your mental space. And there you fell into your own trap. So I think we can begin at least to identify if we fall into these functionings, because we can. Like, we are not extent into falling into these patterns, because we are very much connected to the unified field and we are learning all the other aspects. But we can still fall into those patterns where, we follow an automatic program that comes from under, where the fourth cardinality is included, where we don't have any domain, where we only feel. right? So our mind falls into the trap of the body, and it is really hard to get out of there. But now at least we know that the only thing we have to do is turn to our observer inside. So when I am feeling something and I express it in my mental space, what I am doing is I am putting a seed in the next cycle all over again, like the same exact cycle. When I only feel and then put it in my mind, I am planting the next repetitive cycle. But I don't realize that it's repetitive because I confuse the end of a cycle with the beginning of a cycle. Because it's a cycle, the beginning doesn't look the same as it looks when it ends. So we confuse it. We think it's something new, but we don't realize that it's repetitive. The end of a cycle, it's full of charge. The beginning is empty of charge, but it's full of function. So that's a good way to identify the beginning and the end of a cycle. The end of a cycle is full of charge because you've already went through it. You have the charge of going through it. But the beginning of a cycle, it's empty, but it's full of function, right? So the space-temporal movements makes the cycle begin all over again and to fill up with charge all over again, right? And this is what people call healing. We don't realize that we are in a repetitive cycle. The thing is that it's not healing. We just took it out of our bodies, we put it in our minds, but when we put it in our minds, you are seeding a new repetitive cycle. So this is a pattern where the mind is working for the body. And it is not being a part of the space of the architect. It is as if the architect is tied up. It sees everything, but it cannot do anything because the mind is captured by the body. It is captured by the biological program. So the architect is like, let me go, and it's tied up. So all we need to do to realize all of this so that it begins to be modified is that the appetite, an appetite of another level needs to be activated. Not a physical appetite, because there we're talking about a biological program. An appetite of another dimension needs to be activated, right? So when we're creating a mental space, there we are positioned in the observer, the particular observer, right? Which is the one that creates the mind. So the abstract identity is tied to that observer and it lives outside the brain. So anything can happen to the body, and that's one thing. And the observer is like, okay, because the observer it doesn't need a body. So the body can go through all these things, but the observer is like, okay, you know, because it can defy what the body feels because it's not a body. Yeah. How's everybody feeling? Pretty good, huh? Really good tips for exercising. Exercising her processor. Yeah.
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
September
good.
9th.
Excellent. But
Yeah.
the neurons are sparking everywhere. And now I just got to go.
Go slow down a little bit. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like that. I'm gonna lay down for like an hour.
I'm going to try and get something to eat.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so you guys want to say anything? Any questions? Any observations? Anything you want to share?
I was a bit late. What did you read from? Is it I read 143 or what did
No,
from what?
no. I just have like a bunch of old notes, like a bunch of old notes. So I just grab
Oh.
from there and make a little bit of a mix for you guys.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Concepts,
good.
concepts.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
you know what it is? It's like hard, the registrations of this.
Yeah.
Right? It's not so much words. It just, in fact, just before you asked how we're doing, it just suddenly, there was a response before you asked it. And I had that kind of, just again, just like up an observer,
Because we create, when we meet, we create a field,
Yes.
and we are all connected to that field. Have you guys noticed how the configuration of the field when we meet changes depending on who's present?
Yes.
Yes. But I know that for long. I did facility training in groups with heart
Sorry?
intelligence. I learned about it with heart intelligence.
Heart intelligence?
With
Yeah, that it
Marjolein.
because of the field. Yeah, facilitation of groups.
Okay, sorry, I don't not familiar with
Yeah,
that.
but it's interesting. I know that it depends on who's there and everything. It's very interesting dynamics.
So, one of the things that you brought it up, this group, regardless of who's on the call at any given time, there's that field, I find it like very much maturing each year,
Oh,
as
yes.
does with this group,
Definitely.
where it's not personal because we don't live down the block from one another, that kind of thing. But I feel like there's a maturing of the relationship and the experience
Definitely. Yes, completely.
and a
And not
connectivity. Yeah.
Mhm. And not only the field between us, but of course the variables of the entorno. The place in calendaria, the place in the year, all the metrics of the day, all of those things, of course, are the ones that previously configure that field that later we integrate and that later we absorb from those variables and those configurations to meet and to reason and to do the construction of the concept. So if we don't have that, it's all symbolic. If we don't have the metrics of the frames of the day and all the coordinates, if we don't have that, it's all symbolic. It's all symbolic. So it is very important that we stick to that technical aspect of space temporal structures in this specific context. Because if not, we go through, all these symbolic routes that the only thing that's going to do, it's going to confuse us. It's going to confuse our architect, and it's not going to do us very well in the construction of concepts because the construction of concepts are going to be contaminated. So very, very important that we know, even if we don't go through the metrics like one by one, we have to know that those are the metrics that are feeding the field of this specific day through which we
Yeah.
are processing the flow of signals and then later communicating between us according to our own scopes and blah, 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 right? So that's that, you guys. I think that's good
Yeah.
for today. That was
Very
quite a
Yeah.
lot.
That's
So
quite a lot, yes.
quite a lot. But it was really, I think it flowed quite well.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot to. Sometimes I listen to the meeting myself all over again because sometimes things just come out and I'm like, wow,
Oh, where
wow,
did
I
that
need to
come
listen to
from?
I need to listen to that again. So I am also receiving it because it is as if I am like just using the antenna and then things come out and then I have to position myself on the unfolded and take it, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
So it's like really funny that
Yeah.
You
something.
can tell when you stream it through. It just
Yeah, it's
happens.
exactly.
You really can.
It's like a
Yeah,
live stream.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
So then I hear it and I'm like, wow, where did that come from? So
That's
it's just
right.
it's the antenna. That's not Denisse, okay? That's
And we're
not.
like, how can you say that so clear?
Yeah.
It's so amazing.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
glad. I'm
yeah,
glad.
yeah.
Yeah, very good.
I try to clean my antenna all the time. Keep it clean as possible for you guys.
Well, it was very
So
enriching. Thank you very
it
much.
was really great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much and enjoy the rest of your day and see you soon.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
flight
you.
tomorrow.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.